Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming from right here in Hollywood, California. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you guys joining me as we, a bunch of friends, standing around a virtual water cooler, talking about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news, a little bit of television, some sports here and there we like to sneak in once in a while, and all that kind of jazz. And it's awesome we can get here together and talk about this stuff. And let's go right into it. Off the top with this. Now, we've known for some time that the new DC streaming service, DC Universe, is going to be launching a Harley Quinn an animated Harley Quinn project. And if I'm not mistaken, we got Kuko, the girl from Big Bang Theory, doing it. Anyway, we just found out they have cast their new voice for the Joker. And no, it's not Mark Hamill. It's Alan Tudyk. Alan Tudyk is going to be the voice of the new Joker. And I got to tell you something. I'm pretty intrigued by it. I am pretty intrigued by the voice casting. Now, let's talk about this for a second, because I know this is the first thing that's jumping on everybody's mind. Why not Mark Hamill? If you're going to get the voice for the Joker, why don't you go out and get Mark Hamill, who I believe it's, beyond dispute at this point. When it comes to the animated world, Mark Hamill is the undisputed king of doing the voice of the Joker. I would say this, though. I'm okay with them going with somebody else, particularly if you're going to go get Alan. But let's focus on Mark for a second. I'm okay with them moving away from Mark Hamill because, like in live action movies, if at some point you're doing a new iteration of something and a reboot and a different version of it, you switch up actors. I have no problem in the animated world sticking with the same voices, but I also have no problem with them moving on. Look, Mark Hamill has been the greatest Joker voice in animation history. He will probably do the Joker again in some other way, shape, or form at some point. But at this thing with the new show, I'm okay with them doing something different. Now let's talk about Alan for a second. Alan Tudyk has a fantastic voice. He's got a great voice. And to be quite frank with you, when they said he was going to be the voice of the Joker, I don't know, there was something in the back of my mind that's like, well, isn't he already the voice of the Joker? It's like, isn't he already the voice of the Joker? And he's not, of course, but it just kind of sticks with me on that level. So this brings us to the DC streaming service as a whole when we're talking about DC Universe, right? The thing about DC Universe is this. I have said this from the beginning. There is simply not enough on there to get me interested in subscribing to the service yet. Because right now, all they've got is that Titans show. And the Titans trailers were garbage, so I had absolutely no interest in signing up for this service yet. Now, a bunch of you guys have been talking about that. Some of you have seen the Titans show, and you actually don't mind it so far. Some of you actually quite like it. That's good news. But once DC actually starts rolling out some new content, like this Harley Quinn thing with Alan as the voice of the Joker, and particularly once they get to Swamp Thing. Once they get to Swamp Thing, then you've got me interested. Then there's more to check out. But as far as getting Alan to do it, if it's not going to be Mark Hamill, personally, I think it's a terrific choice. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with it. And maybe once the time Swamp Thing rolls around and I do get this service and I'll check it out, we'll see how he does. All right. Also off the top here, breaking news this morning, a brand new trailer for How to Train Your Dragon 3 has come out. And listen, How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2 are a couple of the, I'll say it as a 1-2 punch. It's one of the best animated franchises, I'll say it, ever. It seriously is. When you look at the quality of How to Train Your Dragon 1, which was one of the best pleasant surprises I've ever had watching an animated film, because when the first How to Train Your Dragon came out, it was kind of in an era that we were talking about. Pixar still is the king in the hill, but really at the time it was like nobody else does decent animation other than Pixar. Along comes How to Train Your Dragon. It didn't look all that great, but it was fantastic. It was absolutely wonderful. Then they do the sequel, and sure, okay, yeah, the sequel now that's going to suck because the sequels always suck. Sequel was every bit as good as the original. So when they announced How to Train Your Dragon 3, a lot of us got very excited, me included. The first trailer came out, spectacular. Now we've got this new trailer, and I love it. I love it. I'll say this. I'm not sure that I like this brand new trailer for How to Train Your Dragon 3 quite as much as that first one. Like that first one was pretty dynamic. It was really great. They had a beautiful song that played with it, all kind of stuff, had a little bit more character to it, some laughs in it. It was really well done. This trailer is fantastic as well. Don't get me wrong. They get you a little bit more into the narrative of the story. They give us some new visuals. They bring back some of the visuals from the first trailer that were funny and engaging and things that we liked a lot. So it's a winner for me. I cannot wait to watch this movie. I'm going to be honest with you. And I will say this. If this movie is on par with How to Train Your Dragon 1 and How to Train Your Dragon 2, I'm not saying it's on the same level as Toy Story trilogy. I'm not saying that necessarily. But it instantly is in the conversation of the greatest animated trilogy ever. Again, if How to Train Your Dragon 3 can come in at least close to being on par as How to Train Your Dragon 1 or 2. I'm curious, what do you guys think? Or do you think How to Train Your Dragon 3 can come in close to the quality of that first one? Do you think it doesn't have a chance in doing that? Even if it does, do you still think it's within the conversation of great all-time animated trilogies? Maybe you didn't like How to Train Your Dragon 1 or 2 that much. Jump down to the comments section below and let me know what you guys think. All right. With that stuff out of the way, let's go on over now to our main questions. Well, how do we select our main questions and our main topics? It's simple. You email them in to us. You do that simply by emailing me your topics and questions to john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Send on in those email questions. And as always, guys, remember to keep those emails to 90 words or less. So with that out of the way, let's get to the first email today. And the first email today comes to us from Daryl B., who writes, "Hey, John, the movie Hunter Killer is opening up this weekend, and even though there isn't any more major films opening up against it, and it has the weekend to itself practically, absolutely no one is talking about it. Is there any reason for optimism on this one?" All right, so yes, this weekend we got Hunter Killer opening, and you're not wrong. Nobody is talking about this movie. Nobody is talking about this movie, despite the fact that you've got a pretty decent cast in there. You got Gerard Butler, you got Common, who I really like Common as an actor. I like the roles, whether it's John Wick or anything else. I like it when Common pops up. But more importantly, you got Academy Award-winning actor Gary Oldman, who for ages was the world's greatest actor that didn't have an Oscar on his mantle. So you got this trio of guys, pretty solid. I mean, with Gary Oldman, you got more than solid. You got absolutely remarkable. But overall, it's a pretty solid cast. You know, submarine adventure, looks like there's some action, all that kind of stuff, and yet nobody is talking about it. As a matter of fact, Box Office Pro is projecting that this movie is going to come in under $9 million in its opening weekend. 9, not 90, not 19. It's going to come in under $9 million. Now, it might come a little higher, it might come a little lower. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to, if you could have told somebody 3 years ago, submarine thriller with a bunch of action, trying to stave off a war between Russia and America. You got Gerard Butler, Gary Oldman coming in there, and you said the opening weekend of this thing was going to be south of $10 million. We all would have said you're nuts. We all would have said you got to be joking. You got to be kidding. That cannot be possible. And yet here we are. And you know what? It's not a matter. Sometimes tracking is off. I don't think tracking's off here. I seriously don't think tracking is off here. Like he brought up in the question, there is simply nobody talking about it. I am feeling no buzz from anybody, and it's opening this weekend. And to make it worse, nobody's talking about it when it's not even opening against anything. Let's take a look at this. Take a look at this, the opening weekend schedule this weekend. You got Hunter Killer. That is pretty much the only really big wide release film. You've got a faith-based movie called Indivisible. It's going to do its business with its demographic. That's fine. You got Johnny English. Look down there at the bottom of the screen there. You got Johnny English, but it's only opening in 500 screens. When we're talking about release dates, we talk a lot about the December 21st, that week where you got Mary Poppins, Bumblebee, Aquaman, Welcome to Morrowind, the Sherlock Holmes film. You got Mortal Engines, you got Spider-Man, the Spider-Verse. Everybody seemed to want to avoid Hunter Killer here, which I don't understand. And yet, in a weekend all to itself, still no buzz, still no chatter about it, and it's going to flop hard. So here's the question I have for you guys, honestly. Why do you think this is? Now, granted, the trailers weren't all that good, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. The trailers for this movie have not been all that good, understandably. But have they been bad enough to bring in a movie with Gary Oldman and, you know, a sub-thriller adventure and all that kind of stuff, Gerard Butler? Have the trailers been so bad to have a movie with these guys make under $10 million? Like, seriously, it's not a facetious question. And it's not rhetorical. I'm honestly asking you guys, have the trailers been that bad? Like, see, to me, the trailers haven't been great, and the trailers haven't done anything to increase my excitement. But I didn't think they were so horrible that they decreased my interest, but maybe it was for you. You guys tell me, why is nobody talking about this movie, and why is this movie going to flop so hard this weekend? I want to know what you guys have to think. Jump down in the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. Okay, let's move on to the second email today. And the second email today comes to us from, where is it at? Who does the second email today come from? There he goes. It comes to us from Gabriel Reed, who writes, "Hey, John, longtime fan. So, my wife, who rarely ever goes to the movies with me, wanted to watch A Star is Born. We were about 15 minutes into the film when some guy's phone rings. Not only did it ring, but this jackass had a conversation on the phone. My main worry at that point was that it would have took my wife out of the film. Luckily, it didn't. My question to you is, how do you deal with annoying moviegoers?" Well, okay, thanks a lot for the question, Gabriel. And yes, we talk a lot about on this show, because, you know, we talk about movies here, the movie-going experience. When you talk to a lot of people today about what are some of the reasons that maybe you don't go to the movies more often, or maybe you don't go to the movies at all. But when you bring that up, the last couple of years, one of the number one things that usually comes up is rude people in the theater. Now, you guys know my point of view here. If you're somebody who uses your phone in the movie theater, burn in hell, you son of a bitch. There is nothing that excuses that level of ignorance. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about the odd time, hey, you forgot to mute your phone and somebody happens to call and it goes off. I get it. That happens. And so you pull out your phone and then you mute it. That's fine. I'm not talking about that, because that's understandable. It happens. It's even happened to me before. I'm sure it's happened to you. But people who just have no sense of common decency, when people have paid money to come into a movie theater, sit there and watch a TV, and either just constantly talk loud or just pull out their phones. And I'm telling you what, maybe it doesn't seem on paper like a big deal, but when I'm sitting in the back of a dark movie theater and I'm engrossed in a movie, and all of a sudden some idiot up front has some light pop up on their phone and it's glowing in this dark theater, I find that personally really distracting. And I hate that. Or whether it's people talking, or whether it's the phone, whatever. We often talk about that being as a problem, but really, what can you do about it? What can you do about it? What can I do about it? Now, look, I'm not a person, maybe you can tell from my personality. I don't mind a little confrontation here and there. I don't mind it at all. But you see, the problem when you're getting into a movie theater situation, I don't mind confronting some jackass and saying, hey, moron, turn off your phone. Like, I don't mind saying that. But here's the problem. Will that actually accomplish anything? Will that actually get the guy to turn his phone off? Or is it just going to become even more distracting for the other people in the movie theater? Is it just going to become more distracting for everybody else? Because now, not only is this jerk off sitting here on his phone, but now some other jerk off, me in this case, is now yelling at him. And that's just probably going to prompt that jerk off, number one, to turn around and yell something back. And it just becomes even more distracting. What do you do? First thing I think we all agree on. If you're sitting close to the person, just very politely say, excuse me, sir, would you mind not putting your phone away if you don't mind? You know what? Most people are just clueless, but I find for the most part, people are clueless, but decent. And they get, what has happened to me once or twice, if that's happened, I've gone, hey, sir, would you mind putting the phone? And they go, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. That's what normally happens. But what do you do if that's not the case? The reality is there's only so much you can do. If you're trying not to be a distraction for everybody else in the movie theater, you can't just grab them by the scruff of the neck, drag them outside a theater and beat the crap out of them. That's not conductive to a good movie viewing experience for people either. So what do? The real answer is there's really nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. And that leads to a point that I've been starting to believe more and more, because I didn't think this way before. I did not have this opinion before, but I'm telling you what, guys, more and more over the last couple of years, I have been forming this opinion more and more, and that is this. I'm starting to believe, and I didn't think this before, but I am starting to believe that movie theaters themselves need to start taking more responsibility in what goes on in the individual movie theater and keep an eye on things a little bit. Now, I understand movie theaters, they have very tight budgets. You can't have 20 extra staff to have everybody in every movie theater as every movie is playing. I get that. But they got to come up with some way to at least modestly monitor what's going on in their theater. Because look, if you've got 150 paying customers who have paid their bloody hard-earned money to come to your establishment and sit there and enjoy a movie, there is a part of responsibility, if not the lion's share of responsibility, on you to ensure that these paying customers have a positive experience. And if one of your other paying customers starts to distract people from that experience, it ain't your other customer's responsibility, or at least it shouldn't be your other customer's responsibility to fix that problem. It should be yours. It should be yours. Now, what's the answer? I think there are some movie theaters in town, like there's a movie theater in Los Angeles here, right up the street from the studio, called the ArcLight Cinema in Hollywood. It's a very, very popular cinema here in Hollywood. A lot of people go. One of the things that they do that I've found works really well is when a movie's about to start, an actual staff person comes out to the front and personally welcomes everybody. So they make it personal. They personally welcome everybody. And then they also say, guys, you know, to make this viewing experience great, please turn off your phones. Please keep it put away. Please be considerate of people around you. And you know what? Just a little thing like that goes a long way. Maybe have one staff person on staff whose job it is to float in between theaters. Just step into a theater there for about 5 minutes, make sure everything's good, move on to the next theater, move on to the next theater, and maybe 20 minutes later he comes back around to this theater again. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have all the answers, but I do believe it is time in an era when the movie industry is struggling to get people to come back to the theaters, and this year's been a good year, but still, in an industry where the movie industry is trying to figure out ways to get people back into the theaters, I believe the theaters themselves need to take a bigger onus of responsibility here and understand that their patrons' positive experience is their responsibility. And that includes the behavior of their other paying customers. That's what I think. Maybe I'm out to lunch. I don't know. What do you guys think? Jump down to the comments section below and let me know your thoughts on that. All right, with that out of the way, let's move on to the third email today. And the third email today, I believe, comes to us from Trey Davis, who writes, "Hey, John, big fan." Thank you so much, Trey. "I know you're excited for Aquaman. I am. But I'm personally rooting for Into the Spider-Verse. The art and animation looks gorgeous, and it's taking risks by embracing the weirdness. If this movie does well, it could really open the door for other experimental, animated, high-profile, and high-quality superhero films. What do you think would come of this film's success?" All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And you know what? Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I'm going to tell you what, and I'm guilty of this as much as, if not more, than everybody else. I believe Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a movie we have been sleeping on. And I think me more than anybody else. I think we've been sleeping on this movie. Because I'll be honest with you, when they first announced this film, and I like this shot a lot. I like this shot a lot. When they first announced this film, I was like, well, that's a waste. That's pretty much a waste of effort. And even when the first trailer dropped, the first trailer, let's be fair to myself here, the first trailer wasn't great. But the first trailer came out and I'm like, well, ain't nobody's going to be interested in this. Just some throwaway idea that Sony had and blah, 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 blah. But then guess what happened? The other trailers have started to come out. People have been getting excited. People like my own wife have been getting really, all of a sudden, my wife, Anne, is dying to see this movie. I think where she really first got excited about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was at the second post-credit scene in Venom. For those of you who saw Venom, if you stick around to the very end of the credits, a little thing comes up on the screen that says, "Meanwhile, in another universe," and they show like a full 7-minute clip from this thing, like a full 7-minute clip from this movie. They play. My wife watched it, loved it. And then they put out that latest trailer that has Spider-Ham in it. Spider-Ham. That was it. Once my wife saw Spider-Ham, once Anne saw Spider-Ham, that was it. Game over. She was completely on board with this movie 100%. So you know what? Yeah, I think I have been sleeping on this movie. I'm thinking this film is going to be better than I expected. And getting more to your point, I think this film is going to be more successful than a lot of us, including me, originally thought of. And really, should it be all that surprising? First of all, Sony's gone all in on this film. They really have. This wasn't some afterthought side project. They went all in it. And you don't have to look any further than their cast, right? Take a look at this cast, this lineup of voice talent that they have brought into this film. It just tells you that they were dead serious. First of all, Jake Johnson is getting bigger and bigger, of course, from New Girl. I love him. He's the voice of Peter Parker. Mahershala Ali, who is one of the most celebrated actors going right now. I cannot wait for his new movie, Green Book, with Viggo Mortensen. That looks like it could be the best film of the year. We'll have to wait and see. You got Haley Steinfeld, who's got, first of all, her movie 13 that she had a couple of years ago. Amazing. She's got Bumblebee coming out. She's got the voice. I believe she's the voice of Gwen Stacy in this. Nick Cage is voicing John Mulaney, who is one of my favorite stand-up comedians right now. He's the voice of Spider-Ham that's got everybody giggling about. And who doesn't love Liev Schreiber? And who doesn't love Sabretooth and Donovan, right? This is an impressive voice cast lineup. Now, that doesn't mean the movie's going to be good, but what it does tell us is that Sony wasn't, they weren't cutting any corners with this. They had an idea, and they decided to go full out. They lined up a great voice cast. We'll see how it goes, more and more people liking it. So the question then becomes, if this movie hits a certain level of success, if this movie is actually that good and that big and has that many people lining up at the theaters to run out and go to see it, will this have a major influence over the other studios and maybe even Sony itself about releasing animated standalone films of their heroes? And to that, I will say, I don't know. I'm not so sure. Because we have to recognize, when we're going to talk about this whole Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse thing, that the Spider-Man character is in a very unique situation compared to other major characters that are out there, right? Other major characters, Batman belongs to DC, cut and dry, that's what it is. Iron Man belongs to Marvel, cut and dry, that's what it is, blah, blah, blah. The Spider-Man character is in a very odd place. He belongs to Sony, but Sony's got an agreement with Marvel so he can pop up in live action in the MCU movies, and he can't do that with but Sony can do animated films, and they can't use a live action Spider-Man, so hey, let's do animated. We can't talk about how big of an influence this will have over other properties without first acknowledging that Spider-Man is in a very unique position, that there are really no other characters in that specific kind of situation. Let's say Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse makes $200 million. I think Sony might be tempted to do another one. Would it move the needle for other studios to try it? I'm not so sure. Let's say Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse makes $400 million. Well, that pretty much guarantees Sony's going to want to do another one. And it might even open up the door for them to try it with other characters of theirs, but I still don't think enough to move the needle for other studios. However, if we start getting into the $500 million, $600 million range, well, now not only is Sony guaranteed to do another one, and is Sony guaranteed to try it with other characters that they control, at that point, you might see Warner Brothers going, hey, we've done a lot of this straight-to-video animated crap. maybe we should try a true feature film animated film with Batman or with Cyborg or with Static Shock or with whoever else. It might make Marvel go, huh, you know, we do a lot of the straight to home video kind of crap, but maybe we should do, I don't know, a Lionheart series. Maybe we should do a Thor animated movie. Maybe we should do, I mean, if this Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse can crack that $500 million, $600 million, heaven forbid, $700 million range, it could be disruptive to the entire, it might be, you might see a pretty much a tectonic shift in how these studios will look at their characters and their potential for animation. Now we just got to wait to see if Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse actually does it. Will it? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. All right, let's move on now to the final email of the day. And the final email today comes to us from Naveed Asharm, who writes, whatever happened to the Nightwing movie? At first it was happening, then it was off, and they said it was just delayed. Now the director is saying there's still hope. If something is just delayed, why do you need hope? Is it ever actually going to happen? All right, thanks a lot for the question, Naveed. And yes, the Nightwing movie and this whole Nightwing project has been a pretty big drama going on for movie fans. First of all, Nightwing got announced, a live-action Nightwing. And for those of you who don't know, and I know a lot of you do, but for those of you who don't, Nightwing is Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson, if you recognize that name, who was the original Robin the Boy Wonder. In the comics and in the mythology, Dick Grayson gets older, he changes personas, he becomes his own hero, and he moves on to become Nightwing, and pretty much iconic and one of the best badass characters in all of comics. I love Nightwing. And the story, honestly, the story of Dick Grayson with Bruce Wayne is seriously one of the most compelling, best things ever. I mention this all the time, but let me repeat it here. At the end of the Nightfall series, you remember after Bane breaks Bruce Wayne's back, Bruce Wayne leaves as Batman. They get in Azrael to come in to be Batman. Azrael goes crazy, starts abusing his power, and then, you know, and Dick Grayson's had to deal with this kind of stuff. And then Bruce had to come back after a year or two, I can't remember how long it was, and finally take back the mantle of the Bat. At the conclusion of this storyline, which, by the way, if you've never read it, I highly encourage you to go to your local comic book shop and look it up, because I think you're really going to enjoy it if you do. But anyway, at the conclusion of this series, there is one of my all-time favorite moments ever in comic book history. And it's after Bruce is now back, he's taken back the mantle of the Bat, and it's all done now. Azrael's been dealt with, and it's just now Bruce and Dick in the Batcave talking. And basically, Grayson is like getting in Bruce's face, saying, what the hell, man? I understand you went down. Why did you go outside the family? Why did you go to Jean Paul, who was Azrael? Why did you go to him? Why didn't you come to me? It was beautifully written. It's emotional. It's powerful. It's all that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget it ends. And I might be getting the exact wording wrong, but basically, you know, Bruce basically talks about how complicated things can be in these types of issues. And he puts his hand on Grayson's shoulder and says, between fathers and sons. And it's the first time, it may have happened many times before, but I remember for me, it was the first time that I read in the comics where Bruce kind of acknowledges that Dick's his son. I mean, in every real term, right? And it's the first time I saw it, and to me, it was one of the most beautiful, powerful moments ever. Anyway, sorry for the sidetrack there. I just love that issue. Anyway, what's been going on with the Nightwing movie, though? Well, the problem is this. They brought on a director named Chris Mckay. You might recognize his name because Chris did an amazing job directing the Lego Batman movie. That Lego Batman movie was awesome, by the way. It was fantastic. So Chris directed the Lego Batman movie. So then they get him on to do Nightwing. Now, here's where some of the turmoil gets involved. From the sources I have, Chris comes on to do Nightwing, and he's plowing full steam ahead with it, right? And he's getting offered a lot of directing gigs after what he did with the Lego Batman movie, but he's turning them down because he's got Nightwing. But it starts getting pushed, and it starts getting pushed, and it starts getting pushed because Matt Reeves' Batman script, at least the first draft, was supposed to be submitted about a year ago. About a year ago. He's just recently turned in the first draft of the script. But as it was becoming apparent that that movie and that whole project was getting more and more delayed and more pushed, Chris Mckay kept working on it, turning down other jobs, until it finally got to the point, because they didn't want to proceed with their Nightwing thing until they knew exactly what they were doing with Batman, and Batman was so far behind schedule that at some point Chris Mckay finally said, look, I can't stay. I'm turning down too many other opportunities. I need to step away from Nightwing and go perhaps do some other things, right? Never saying that he was gone for good. Anyway, that all leads us to where are we now then with Nightwing? Because we still don't have a Batman movie. Where are we now with Nightwing? Well, here's where we're at. Somebody on Twitter wrote to Chris Mckay and asked him, hey, so is the Nightwing film dead now? And here's what Chris Mckay said in his tweet response. Chris Mckay said, no, it's not that it's no more. You're going to have to wait, though. Keep hope alive. To paraphrase Dick Grayson, Nightwing lives always. No, you're going to have to wait, though. Keep hope alive. To paraphrase Dick Grayson, Nightwing lives always. Okay, so what do I get out of this? When I read this statement and I read this tweet, what am I interpreting out of this? I'm interpreting a couple things. Number one, Chris Mckay still wants to do Nightwing. That's what I interpret. I interpret that he still wants to do Nightwing, that he's still planning on doing Nightwing. I think he's got his idea for Nightwing. I think he's been ready to roll on Nightwing for a long damn time. But it's still not 100% sure. When he uses language like, there's still hope, there's still hope. To me, that also suggests that while he wants to do it, he's ready to do it, he's got his idea for it. It also suggests to me that at this point, it's probably not a sure thing. It's probably not a sure thing. Now, that's not what you want to hear. That's not what I want to hear as a fan of the DC stuff, as a fan of Nightwing, but it is pretty much where we're at right now. And I think it's going to stay unresolved, and I think it's going to stay unclear until we get some more clarity on what's happening with Matt Reeves' Batman project. So until that happens, I think we're just going to have to take Chris Mckay's advice and saying, just wait, keep hope alive, and Nightwing lives forever. So are you guys looking forward to a Nightwing movie? I know I am. I think it could be fantastic. Jump down to the comment section and let me know what you guys think. Okay, guys, with all the main topics out of the way here, let's save some time and go over and take some of your live questions. A bunch of you guys have already been sending in a whole ton of live questions, so let's go over and start taking some of your live questions right now. And the first live question we're getting to today comes to us from Kara Black, who writes, will you do a spoiler review for Daredevil Season 3? I still haven't seen Daredevil Season 3. So I will say this. I am planning finally, because you guys know I've been kind of busy lately. I am planning finally to start getting around to Daredevil this weekend. And I'm hoping I can get through the entire season. If I can get through the entire season this weekend like I'm planning on, I'm going to do a spoiler review for Daredevil probably early next week. If I can't get around to watching Daredevil Season 3 this weekend, then I probably won't do a spoiler review because the window of opportunity will have closed. It'll be too little too late. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking. All right, Kara Black follows it up with, if you haven't been watching Supergirl, you might want to this week. The episode is called Man of Steel and will put heavy focus on Sam Witwer's Agent Liberty. He's been superb in the first 2 episodes. Okay, so you guys know my attitude about the Supergirl show. The way they turned Superman into a jobber pissed me off, so I've kind of ditched on it. However, I did say when they announced that Sam Witwer, who is 0-2 against me in Star Wars trivia, I'm just saying, when they announced that Sam Witwer was going to be taking on a major role in Supergirl, I did say, well, I will probably give it a chance then because Sam's in it, right? And who doesn't love Sam? But it's funny that you bring that up because I got this queued up here. It's funny that you bring that up because last night, in West Hollywood, Ann and I, and you can see Ann there in the picture, and that's her with Sam Witwer. So it's kind of funny to bring up stuff. So this is from last night. And yes, in the background, that's Deathstroke. That's Joe Manganiello. Right beside Sam is Sam's brother, Michael. And right beside Michael is, of course, fanboy director Kyle Newman. Anyway, we were there last night with those guys celebrating the release of their new book, Dungeons & Dragons, Art and Arcana. It's amazing. So for those of you who know anything about Sam and about Joe Manganiello, they are diehard Dungeons & Dragons guys. just diehard Dungeons and Dragons guys. So we were actually hanging out with Sam and Kyle and Joe last night, and that was Ann with them. So love him. By the way, guys, I've actually got a couple of the authors, including Kyle, are coming into studio, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about their new, because you guys know I play Dungeons and Dragons with Ann. So we're going to talk to those guys about their new book, and that's going to be on tomorrow's show. So make sure you tune in tomorrow to check out a little bit of that interview. So, but thanks for bringing that up, Kara. All right. The Frost Sisters writes, we love your show. Keep bringing the filthy. Thank you so much, Frost Sisters. I appreciate that very much. Ben Rayner writes, did you used to watch Fringe? Thoughts on it? Oh, yeah, I used to love Fringe. Fringe was great. I will say this, though, like a lot of shows, it kind of fell apart a little bit near the end. Remember I was talking about Grimm recently? Grimm is another show that I loved dearly. I was really into it, but the last season kind of fell apart. I felt the same way about Fringe. I thought it started really strong, and I was really into the show. And the lead girl, I forget her name from that. She's now the lead girl in Mindhunter on Netflix, and she's really good in that as well. But it was also a show that kind of fell apart near the end, unfortunately. But overall, I really enjoyed it. Mason Barr writes, what's up, John? How's the fam? The fam is good. Thank you for asking. I love the new studio. I myself have some new changes of scenery. Purchased my first home. I'm overexcited. Dude, Mason, congratulations. I am completely envious. I live in a city where Ann and I have been wanting to buy a house for a long time, right? And it's like, but we live in a place where to get like a 2-bedroom, 1,000 square foot house starts at like $600,000. Like starts at $600,000, which makes me so pissed off because I watch HGTV. My wife and I are kind of addicted to the home improvement shows and to the home renovation shows, right? But we watch these shows and they're like, okay, because they're somewhere in Texas or in Wisconsin or something, right? It's like, okay, so here we have a 5-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house with 2 acres back lawn and a private lake, and they're asking $200,000. I'm like, fuck you! I'm like so pissed off because I can't even get a 1-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles for that. So I am super envious and super excited for you, Mason. Well done, sir. Ant Banks 1984 writes, with the recent Megyn Kelly controversy about blackface, people need to do research on films like Birth of a Nation and old Looney Tunes shorts to see where blackface came from and why it's not cool. I think everybody understands why it's not cool. Now, I have heard of the Megyn Kelly thing and I've heard of her comments. I don't give a shit about people like that, and I don't feel like I need to, ooh, who's screwing up today? I've never gone and watched the clip, so I really don't care. So I can't really comment on it, but your comments, Ant Banks, are absolutely correct. James Welsh writes, thoughts on Netflix borrowing another $2 billion? Hey, look, it's a company right now that is expending a lot of cash. Like, they make a ridiculous amount of money, but they also expend a ridiculous amount of money. Like, no studio puts out 90 films a year, but that's what Netflix wants to do. Netflix wants to create 90 original films a year and however many live original programming and all that kind of stuff. They are dreaming big, and good on them. But it costs a lot of money. And you don't always have that cash in the bank and on hand. And if they need to borrow money to make money, yeah, it's business. So other than that, look, I'm not going to pretend to know Netflix's business model inside out and backwards. So I'll just say, yeah, I could see why. They do spend a lot of money. Angry Irish Benjamin writes, irony in Batman vs. Superman. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen are Thomas and Martha Wayne. In the Walking Dead TV series, the former characters killed the husband of the latter character. Here, they're husband and wife. Not to mention, Morgan's character used a bat as the murder weapon. I don't know if that's irony per se. I don't know if it's irony. That's a little bit of a stretch, saying he used a bat to use it. Still, my favorite Lucille story. Lucille's the name of what's the character? What's Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character? What is it? Negan. Negan. My favorite Negan and Lucille story is still the fact that you remember Jeffrey Dean Morgan played John Winchester in Supernatural. He was Sam and Dean's dad in the first couple of seasons, right? And then his character died off. And I think it was about 2 seasons ago or about a season ago, they start off an episode of Supernatural where Sam and Dean go into the trunk where all their weapons are, and they pull out a baseball bat with barbed wire around it, and they go, man, I love this thing. No wonder Dad loved it so much. Of course, paying homage to Jeffrey Dean Morgan, was now playing Negan in Walking Dead and using Lucille. And then Jeffrey Dean Morgan had the best reply on Twitter. He replied, boys, I told you not to touch my stuff. It was just great. I love the little tie in there. Cobra writes, Kirk or Picard? Picard. Who would I want to take into a pure war zone? Probably Kirk. But overall, Picard is just the better Starfleet officer, so I'm going to go with Picard on that. Matt, I now, like half of you guys are screaming at your computer monitors at me. All right, next up, Matt Brown writes, Infinity War has even more depth after realizing that the characters having flaws just like real people is what leads to Thanos winning, i.e. Star-Lord being impulsive and Thor not going for the head out of revenge. Well, Matt, actually, if you think about it, Star-Lord being impulsive is not what led to Thanos' victory. Remember, Doctor Strange said, I've looked at 14 million possible outcomes. 14 million, I think it was 14 million, possible futures and outcomes. Iron Man says to him, how many do we win? He says, 1. That means out of all the possible combinations of events that could have happened, there was only one combination of events that possibly leads to them ultimately winning. And of course, Doctor Strange says at the end, there was no other way before he dies, right? He says there was no other way. That was him indicating this is the path that leads to the one way that we may possibly win this. That includes Star-Lord had to lose his temper and punch Thanos in the face. If Star-Lord didn't lose his temper and punch Thanos in the face, there would have been no possibility for them having that victory, right? Am I getting a little deep in the sweatiness here? Maybe. But just something to keep in mind. But you're right, the movie is pretty deep, Tony, or Matt. Okay. Murray Reich writes, my friend of mine canceled Cinemia because it was too complicated for him to use. He wants to use A-list, but he only sees 2 to 3 movies a month. Do you think AMC will come out with a smaller plan? No, I don't think so. But here's what I would say to your friend. Even if you only see 2 to 3 movies per month, at $20 a month, you're still saving money. You're still saving money. I mean, you're still saving money at 2 movies a month. You are absolutely saving money if you go to see 3 movies a month. So I don't think you're going to see AMC come out with a smaller plan. It just doesn't make sense. If you're somebody who's only going to go to the movies once a month, then they're happy for you to buy a ticket from them once a month. It's for people who go a little bit more. So I honestly don't see them losing that. And by the way, I'm a fan of Cinemia. I still carry my Cinemia card. But I have always said that one of the things that MoviePass does better than Cinemia was the app. The MoviePass app was very, very intuitive and very easy to use. Cinemia's, my one criticism of Cinemia is that it is nowhere near as intuitive and easy to use. Like, even I get a little bit confused with this sometimes, for heaven's sakes. So that is the one thing they really do need to improve is their user interface. Let's see, Matt Brown writes, I didn't know she had a pony. That's Friends. That's from Friends. I didn't have it for a second, but then I picked up on it. Let's see. Where am I here? I didn't know she had a pony. Okay. Evil writes, holy crap, Vincent freaking D'Onofrio is awesome. Best season of Daredevil so far, in my opinion. And am I the only one who felt bad for Dex at times? Well, I haven't seen it yet, so I cannot comment on that. And I don't know what happens to Dex, so no idea. But look, Vincent D'Onofrio, seriously, you might want to have a conversation. You know, I often talk about how there are a couple of guys who you could just swear were born to play their roles, their comic book roles. You're talking about Hugh Jackman, obviously, as Wolverine. You're talking about Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. You're talking about Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. You might have to put Vincent D'Onofrio. I know it's not a movie, but you might need to put Vincent D'Onofrio in there as Kingpin. The dude has been awesome all the way through. So even though I haven't seen season 3 yet, I have no doubt you're absolutely right. Terry writes, hey, John. Hi, Courtney. You're really cute. She is very cute, by the way, both inside and out. If Aquaman makes $1 billion, if Aquaman makes $1 billion, what do you think the implications would be for the DCEU? Okay, here's the thing, Terry. We can talk about fantasy all we want. I can say, oh, Hunter Killer's coming out. Hey, John, if Hunter Killer makes $1 billion at the box office, what do you think that'll do for Gerard Butler's career? If Hunter Killer makes $1 billion, look, Aquaman's not going to make $1 billion. It's just not. It's not going to come close, and it doesn't need to come close. It's actually unfair for us to put these types of numbers and these types of expectations on this movie when it's really not realistic at all. And it doesn't need to hit that type of number to be successful. I'm telling you right now, if this movie can do Venom numbers of business, if it can make $400 to $500 million, DC's going to take that as a win. Look, if you put out Justice League with Aquaman in it, and Superman, and Batman, and Wonder Woman, and The Flash, and Cyborg, if you can put out Justice League and make $650 million, and then you can put out Aquaman in his own movie and make $400 to $500 million, dude, that's a win. That's a big win. They'll take that in a heartbeat. Can it make more than that? Yep, it can make more. But let's be realistic here. It is not going to make $1 billion. It's not going to come anywhere near it. It's not going to come within a whiff of it, especially when you consider the murderer's row that it's opening against. It's opening against Mary Poppins, for heaven's sakes. It's opening against Bumblebee. And it's possible Aquaman will make more money than both of those movies, but those movies are going to eat up a lot of the possible box office that maybe could have gone to Aquaman. And it doesn't get any easier. So let's go to fairy tale land for a second. If it make $1 billion, what are the implications for DCU? Well, the same implication would be for any studio and any franchise if one of their films makes $1 billion. It's going to be a huge boost in the arm. Huge. But it's not going to make $1 billion, and it doesn't need to make $1 billion for it to have an impact and for it to be successful. All right, History Soup writes, awful Mandarin twist, Marvel's biggest mistake? I don't think so. Look, I understand a lot of you guys hated what they did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. I get it. I do. I understand. You were kind of sold a bill of goods through the marketing that this was Mandarin. And spoiler alert, it's not the Mandarin. I get it. But honestly, it worked for me. Look, I didn't think Iron Man 3 was a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. Not at all. But it really worked for me. It did. I get it. I liked the bait and switch a little bit. I thought it worked. Was that their biggest mistake ever? No. I think Jane as a Thor character might have been their biggest mistake ever. I don't personally think that's their biggest mistake ever. Pelican Mike writes, you think we'll ever see Liv Tyler as Betty again? I don't think so. I think they've moved away from the character. And even if they wanted to bring the Betty character back, she played opposite a different actor playing Bruce, right? She was playing opposite Ed Norton Jr. So even if they wanted to bring the Betty character back, they would have a really good window there to replace the actress if they so chose. So if you're asking me if I think they will, so a 50-50 proposition, I'm going to guess no, we're not going to see her back. Marie Seifring writes, the trailer for Frontrunner, the movie with Hugh Jackman playing Gary Hart, looks interesting. Thoughts and thanks. I thought it didn't look interesting. I thought it looked amazing, especially in the political environment today. I thought that trailer looked fantastic. Now, look, I was just a young kid when the true stuff with Gary Hart and all this stuff was going on. But I think it's going to be a remarkable commentary and an amazing thing to reflect on to see where we've come from then till now. That trailer I thought was riveting. I cannot wait to see the Frontrunner. And yeah, so those are my thoughts on it. Marie writes, Hugh Jackman. Didn't you write Hugh Jackman? You wrote Huge Jackman. You know how often I accidentally write huge instead of Hugh? I seriously, I write and thinking I'm spelling it right. I do that all the time, so don't worry about it, Marie. Last couple of questions here. Randall Juarez writes, is Wonder Woman 1984 changing so DC has less strife with the MCU? No, it has not. Look, DCEU doesn't give one squirt of piss what Marvel does. They don't care what Marvel does. The only time that there's a problem is if they're scheduled to open movies on the same weekend. I can remember like they were, I believe, was it Justice League or Batman versus Superman that was scheduled to open the same time as Captain America Civil War? I'm gonna guess it was Batman versus Superman. That's the only time the two studios care what the other one is doing. because then one of them had to move. But for this, no, not at all. I don't think that has anything to do with it. Warner Brothers is going to release their movie when they think it gives their movie the best chance of success, and they won't care what that has to do with the MCU. Valeria626 writes, any movie tropes you feel bad about hating? It isn't exclusive to films based on true events, but those films always seem to have a look at this effing hero with the music flaring in slow-mo. Oh, that certainly isn't just a true events thing. I mean, that's all over the place. Movie tropes that I feel bad about hating. Nope. I feel good about my hatred. I feel really good and solid about my hatred. And there's a lot of movie tropes I hate. I talk about them all the time. The not over the phone, meet me at such and such a place and that person's sure to die. The fact that they always make it out as if random sex isn't messy. About the fact that, hey, if the hero loves a girl and that girl's dating somebody else, that somebody else is always a dick. They never make them a good guy. I mean, there's tons of movie tropes that drive me crazy, but I can't think of any off the top of my head that I feel bad about hating. All right. Let's see. Valeria follows up with, I hate it, but I feel bad since it's based on a real person who possibly died. Yeah. Like, I don't mind that. Honestly, that one doesn't bother me. Movies about a true story and true heroes, painting them and shooting them heroically, I got no problem. That's never bothered me. It bothers me a little bit more maybe in Michael Bay non-true story movies. But other than that, it's never really been one that bothered me. But I can see where you're coming from. All right. Rami J. Royster writes, Vincent D'Onofrio was over the top, but he was brilliant in all the right ways in Daredevil. Awesome season. Well, I mean, the thing about Daredevil, Rami, is that Daredevil and in particular Kingpin, he's supposed to be a little bit over the top, right? That's the way they created this character. They made an eccentricness to the character that does take him a little bit over the top and does make it a little more out there. And it just allows Vincent D'Onofrio to really sink his teeth into this character. You hurt Vanessa. It really allowed him to sink his teeth into the character and crush it. I haven't even seen season 3 yet, but I have no doubt you're absolutely correct about Vincent D'Onofrio killing it. I'm telling you, you got to put him in the conversation with Ryan Reynolds, Robert Downey Jr., and Hugh Jackman as guys who are just like born to play that role. I'm telling you. All right. Last question of the day comes to us from Mercer Create, who writes, thoughts on CBS making an animated Star Trek comedy? This just broke. I just saw this headline just before we started going live with the show, so I decided not to make it one of the topics. It was last second. But apparently, word came out that CBS has ordered, I believe, like 2 seasons, if I remember reading the headline correctly, of an animated Star Trek comedy. So I don't know. We know that CBS and their all-access streaming service, they've been going all in on Star Trek lately. Like with Star Trek Discovery, which I really like. I think Discovery's really good. Then they got this Jean-Luc Picard show coming, which is great. We knew they were developing animation. I didn't know there was going to be animated comedy, though. So the question is, are these animated films supposed to be tied in with their ongoing Star Trek universe? Is it supposed to be an Elseworld side, spoof kind of thing? I don't know. I'll say this. Good on them for being gutsy. Good on them for being gutsy and trying something a little bit outside the box. I respect that. Now, we'll have to wait and see if the show's any good or not, but at least for now, we can say they're trying something different, and you always got to tip your hat to that even just a little bit. All right, guys, that will do it for all the live questions, and that'll do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Listen, guys, don't forget, follow me on Twitter, simply at John Campea, because tomorrow we're going to start up a lot of you guys have been asking us to return question of the day. It's going to come back tomorrow, and the question of the day is always going to be posted on my Twitter, so make sure you're prepped for that. Jump on Twitter. Make sure you're following me at John Campea. I want to thank everybody in the studio here, from Jonathan, Fact Checker Jonathan, Ray, Obed, everybody else around here. And thank you to you guys for being here. It's just no fun being a film fan if you don't have other film fans to talk with stuff about. We'll be back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks a lot for being here, guys. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.